The forest was denser than I remembered. The trees loomed overhead, their twisted branches forming a tangled canopy that blocked out the moonlight. My footsteps were muffled by the damp earth, and the only sounds were the distant rustling of leaves and my own uneven breathing. I had sworn never to come back here, but something had drawn me back. A whisper in my dreams, a gnawing guilt that refused to fade. No matter how many years passed, the weight of what I had done lingered, clawing at the edges of my mind. The path twisted and turned, just as it had before. Every tree, every rock, every dip in the earth felt both familiar and wrong, as if the landscape had shifted slightly in my absence. The deeper I went, the more the world seemed to close in around me. The air was heavy with moisture, thick with the scent of damp earth and rotting wood. Then, through the mist, the cabin appeared. It stood there, silent and waiting. The wooden walls were warped and weathered, darkened by years of rain and neglect. The windows were empty black holes, staring at me with the kind of knowing silence that made my stomach twist. A broken lantern still hung by the door, swaying slightly, despite the stillness of the air. A shiver crawled up my spine as I stepped onto the porch. The old rocking chair creaked ever so slightly. I stopped, staring at it, trying to convince myself it had always been like that. I hesitated at the door, my fingers grazing the handle. The wood felt colder than it should have, as if the place itself resented my return. I took a deep breath, forcing my mind to steady, and pushed the door open. The inside was just as I remembered, dusty, abandoned, yet strangely untouched. The fireplace was empty, the table in the center of the room covered in a thin layer of dust. The scent of old wood and decay lingered in the air. My eyes scanned the room, searching for something, anything, that had changed. But nothing seemed out of place, and yet something felt off. Then I heard it. A creak from the bedroom. My pulse quickened. The air in the cabin grew thick, suffocating. I turned toward the hallway, each step slow and hesitant. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. I reached for the door, pushing it open. The hinges groaned like a dying breath, and the darkness swallowed me whole. The bed, where no one should have been, was occupied. A shape lay beneath the covers, unmoving, yet unmistakably present. My breath caught in my throat. The sheets rose and fell in a slow, unnatural rhythm. A faint sound filled the air, something between a whisper and a sigh, like the last breath of a dying man. I took a step back. My mind screamed at me to run, to leave this place behind, but my body refused to move. Then, the figure shifted. A low creak echoed through the room as the thing beneath the sheets stirred. A single, suffocating moment stretched between us before the silence was broken by the whisper of fabric. A hand, pale, bony, impossibly familiar, slipped from beneath the covers. I knew that hand. I had buried that body years ago. The whisper came then, slithering through the room like cold fingers brushing against my skin.
You never should have come back.
I stumbled backward, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. My body screamed for me to run, but my legs were locked in place, rooted by a terror so deep it felt like my bones had turned to ice. The hand remained motionless, fingers slightly curled as if frozen mid-reach. The dim light filtering through the cracked window cast elongated shadows over the bed, making the shape beneath the covers seem impossibly stretched, distorted. A long-forgotten nightmare made flesh. The whisper came again, slithering through the air like a snake.
You never should have come back.
My stomach churned. The voice. It wasn't just a voice. It was his voice. Memories slammed into me with the force of a tidal wave. The last time I had stood in this cabin, the floorboards had been slick with blood. The sound of rain pounding against the roof had drowned out his final, gasping breaths. My hands had trembled as I dragged his body through the mud, the weight of my own sin heavier than the storm that raged around me. And now here he was. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to move. My fingers fumbled against the lantern on the bedside table. But as soon as I touched it, something shifted beneath the sheets. The bed groaned under the weight of the thing that should not be. I tore my hand away as the shape beneath the covers sat up, The sheets slid away, revealing only darkness where a face should have been. No eyes, no mouth, just an abyss, deep and endless. My breath caught in my throat, but before I could react, it lunged. A cold hand clamped around my wrist, fingers like steel digging into my skin. I gasped, struggling, but the grip tightened, an impossible strength pulling me closer. The whisper became a chorus of voices, overlapping, suffocating me with words I couldn't fully understand. But one phrase was clear.
It's time to remember.
I fell. Not backward, not to the ground, but through the floor, through the walls, through time itself. The room melted away, and suddenly, I was somewhere else. Rain lashed against the cabin's roof. My clothes were soaked, my hands trembling as I gripped the handle of the shovel. My breath came in ragged gasps, mixing with the sound of digging. The hole was almost done. I looked down at the body. His eyes, wide open, unblinking, seemed to stare straight through me, accusing. The gash on his temple had stopped bleeding, the rain washing away the last traces of warmth from his skin. I wanted to close his eyes. I wanted to whisper an apology, but instead I lifted the shovel and began covering him with dirt. Each scoop felt heavier, as if the earth itself resisted, as if it knew what I had done. Lightning flashed, illuminating the twisted trees around me. A shadow shifted among them. I froze, my breath hitching, but there was nothing, just the wind howling through the branches, whispering secrets I refused to hear. When I finished, I stepped back, panting. The grave was shallow, but the storm would erase my tracks. No one would ever find him. No one would ever know, except me. I gasped, my vision snapping back to the present. I was no longer in the bedroom. I was outside. The night was thick with fog, the scent of damp earth surrounding me. My knees pressed into the ground, my fingers dug into loose soil. I was kneeling at the edge of his grave, but the dirt had been disturbed. The grave was open, and it was empty. A breath of cold air tickled the back of my neck, and a voice rasped directly into my ear.
You buried me once.
A hand clamped onto my shoulder.
Now it's your turn.
A cold hand gripped my shoulder, its touch like frost biting through my skin. My breath hitched in my throat as the whisper slithered through the damp air, each word soaked in something far worse than mere malice.
Now it's your turn.
I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs, but there was no one there, only the forest stretching into endless darkness. The grave lay open before me, the disturbed earth forming a jagged wound in the ground. The trees loomed overhead, their twisted branches casting shadows that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. I staggered back, my hands slick with mud and sweat. My pulse roared in my ears, drowning out the silence. And then, the first step. Not mine. Something moved beyond the trees, the crunch of leaves deliberate, measured. I strained my eyes, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The fog thickened, curling through the branches like fingers grasping at unseen things. The air felt wrong, heavy, like the pressure before a storm. Another step. Closer. A silhouette emerged from the mist. It was him. Or what was left of him. The figure stood just beyond the grave, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. His clothes were the same ones I had buried him in, torn, caked with dried mud. But his face was wrong. His skin was too pale, stretched too tight over his bones. And his eyes, God, his eyes, they were empty. They were not hollow, not black pits of darkness, but empty, as if something had scooped out everything human and left only a shell behind. When he moved, it wasn't natural. His limbs jerked like a marionette controlled by unseen hands, the sound of his joints cracking louder than the wind that rustled through the leaves. He's not real. He can't be real. I stepped back, my foot slipping in the wet earth. He mirrored my movement, tilting his head again, studying me. And then, in a voice that no longer belonged to him, he spoke.
You don't remember everything, do you?
The air left my lungs. The memories had been coming in fragments, shoveling dirt, the weight of his body, the rain washing away the evidence. But there was something missing, something I had refused to see. His face twisted into something that might have been a smile, the corners of his mouth stretching too wide, too unnatural. He knew what I had forgotten. I opened my mouth to speak, to deny, to run. But then the ground beneath me collapsed. I fell, the world turning into a blur of darkness and rushing air. The grave swallowed me whole, and for a single breathless moment I was weightless. And then I hit the bottom. Pain exploded through my body as I landed hard, my breath knocked from my lungs. I gasped, choking on dust and the scent of damp soil. The walls around me pulsed like something alive, the dirt shifting, breathing. Above me, the hole I had fallen through seemed impossibly far away. And then, something moved in the darkness. A rasping breath. Close. Too close. I turned my head, and there, in the blackness beside me, something stirred. A pair of hands, pale and skeletal, crawled from the shadows, fingers sinking into the dirt as if pulling something forward. And then a face, his face, emerged from the void, inches from mine. His lips barely moved as he whispered,
Now you remember.
The earth closed above me. Darkness swallowed everything. The darkness pressed against me thick as drowning water. My lungs burned, my fingers clawing at the damp earth. But the grave held me firm. The whisper still echoed in my ears. His voice, my voice, the past bleeding into the present.
Now you remember.
And I did. The missing pieces of that night snapped into place, sharp as broken glass. The argument, the struggle. His hands around my throat before I wrenched free, before the rock met his skull with a sickening crunch. The silence afterward. The sheer suffocating terror of what I had done. I had buried him. But not just once. The truth crashed into me like a tidal wave. This was not the first time I had returned. I had been here before. Again and again. Each time, I had uncovered the grave. Each time, I had seen his face staring back at me. Each time, he had whispered the same thing. And each time, I had forgotten. The realization sent a violent shudder through me. I had buried more than a body that night. I had buried the memory itself. But someone, had been pulling me back, forcing me to remember, trapping me in an endless cycle of guilt and horror. The earth shifted beneath me. The hands in the dark gripped my arms, my legs, pulling, dragging. Cold fingers wrapped around my throat, pressing, tightening. My vision blurred, my body convulsed, and then light. A sudden blinding flash burst through the darkness. A noise, like wind rushing through an open door. And just like that, the pressure vanished. I gasped, my chest heaving as I scrambled to my feet. The grave had disappeared. The cabin, the trees, the endless night, all gone. Instead, I stood in an empty field beneath a gray morning sky, damp earth clinging to my clothes. I was alone. For the first time in what felt like lifetimes, I was alone. The wind howled through the grass, whispering my name, but I ignored it. My hands trembled as I reached for my face, feeling for something, proof that I was still here, still real. My fingers brushed against my own skin, my own lips, my own eyes, and then they touched something else, something deep beneath the surface of my mind, just out of reach. A thought, a warning. Had I really escaped, or had the cycle simply begun again? A sharp breath rattled through my lungs as I turned, my shadow stretching long against the pale earth. Behind me, at the edge of the field, stood a figure, watching, waiting. And as the wind carried the faintest whisper to my ears, my blood ran cold.
You never should have come back.